while I was there, the iPhone was invented, Facebook launched, like there was a lot of change within the industry. So it was kind of lucky and a bit kismet timing that I happened to be at an organization that was going through so much change, and the world was going through so much change in technology at the same time. So back then there wasn't really a lot of definition around what a product manager was. So I was able to continue to kind of grow and develop that role. But what I really liked about it was, kind of stakeholder relations, working with different groups within the organization. I love working with engineers. I'm still to this day fascinated that, you can build these amazing products with a few lines of code. And so it's, I think it's just that the opportunity and looking at, hey, technology is moving so quickly. How do I get to be a part of it? How do I get to increasingly kind of influence and bring value to an organization and to the end user? So I think it was that prompted me, and that curiosity around innovation and working within tech that prompted me to continue to kind of to move. Wonderful, thank you.
Nothing was really planned, I'll say. A lot of the earlier roles, yeah, it's on. A lot of the earlier roles, certainly for my journey, they were broader roles to begin with. So the concept of a technical product manager or a business product manager didn't exist. It was, you were the product guy, and you had a much larger remit, which forced you to kind of have not only the technical side, but an immense part of the business side, and making sure you kind of had both pieces. And so that doesn't exist quite the same today, especially in a SaaS world where there's a lot more sort of separation of things. So I would say I really was lucky in terms of that early journey to get that exposure, and I kind of kept that exposure going. So regardless of the roles that I went to, I found it extremely interesting, and a desire to really learn other aspects of those tangential things, the people that you always work with, whether it be the engineering staff, whether it be the sales organizations, customer success, the clients. Lots and lots of interaction with the clients. And to me, it was sort of, at one point, I was sort of doing the role in a sort of a miniature sort of state for the various products. And then I just got the bug, and there was opportunities that presented themselves, and more so in terms of them coming to me rather than me kind of forcibly going for it. But there was never, I would say, this moment where I went, I'm going to learn to become a CEO. It was by doing the right things for each of those companies, and being inquisitive, learning more about the business, which is extremely important. You have to understand the business to then get to these next levels.
Well, thank you so much, both. And so it's interesting because when we think about transitions, those transitions often come with challenges. So can you speak to a little bit about what were some of the challenging things that you faced when shifting away from a product-centric role into an executive role, and how did you overcome those?
Yeah, I mean, for me, a lot of the challenge was around transitioning also to another industry. So for many of you, as you start to kind of continually progress in your career, you may, instead of directly moving up in your own organization, you may kind of move diagonally or sideways into a role in another organization that maybe has more career advancement opportunities, maybe is bigger, or maybe is in a faster moving, faster growing industry. And I would encourage that. It certainly has been one of the opportunities of my career. I went from professional sports to weather to a company called Vertical Scope, which is also publicly traded, but wasn't at the time. That was community website driven. I had over 1,600 websites largely in the automotive space, which wasn't something that I had done before. And then I pivoted and went into real estate. So I would say, one of the things is, the fundamentals that you learn in each one of those roles, you can transition with you. which is so great. You know, there's a lot of fundamentals within product management that it doesn't matter what industry you are in, you can leverage. So I would say the challenge was learning new industries, but with that challenge came a lot of opportunity. So don't shy away from that opportunity.
Yeah, I'm going to piggyback on a couple of the points that you mentioned. Every step of the way you're learning, regardless of that new experience, and that's an extremely important part. And things that you sometimes don't understand, maybe at a certain level or a certain point in time when you're working in a company, just constantly understand, right, that there's sometimes very good reasons why either upper management, executives have made decisions. You'll sit there at times going, I don't understand why they made that decision. But a lot of times, rather than sit there and go and ask, like try and understand, be inquisitive around, again, that the business side of it, the legal side of it, whatever aspect that you don't have, right, as part of your dimensionality. To answer your question though, about the challenge, to me, it's about, there's times to have focus, like extreme focus, to the point where you are directing the team and demanding that focus for the betterment of the business. And you need to be able to switch at times, depending on what discussion and what organization you're having with, to be able to go broader, right? So you need to be able to change very quickly, depending on the department you're talking about, depending on the topic you're talking about, depending on what is going on, where you'll come out of a meeting where you're so focused on one thing and making sure everyone is going that direction. You go into a different meeting and you've got to listen, you got to broaden, so you've got to be able to do that, all within sort of the context of either, of a day, of a meeting, or what have you. So to be able to sort of switch, right? Make sure that you're understanding who it is that's on the other side of you, and then what do you need from them? What do they need from you in order to be successful? So that was, very early on, being able to kind of switch very quickly, where you kind of came out of a very focused meeting and now you had to really listen and have some empathy for whatever reason in the context. So that was certainly one of the challenging things for me.
Thank you. I'll just actually add to that, because you raised a fantastic point. Something that somebody told me when I was really early on in my career was know your audience. And I don't think that ever resonated as much when I was a CEO, because it's absolutely that point. You're messaging constantly, whether it's to the whole team, to your board, various stakeholders, whether it's partners, and that sort of thinking about who you're speaking to and what's really important in the message, and really making sure that you're clear, that brevity and the things that you want to get across becomes so much more important at those higher levels.
Yeah.
Thank you both. So talking a little bit more about sort of that, that transition in that role, thinking about how this might have impacted the way that you approach stakeholder management. So can you speak to a little bit about how that might have evolved when you transitioned into a CEO role?
Yeah, I can jump in there. So when I think about stakeholder management, when you're an individual product management, a lot of what you're doing is trying to influence and motivate people that don't necessarily report to you, right? Which I actually think is the best learning ground. Because if you can convince a group of people to all galvanize around one goal and none of them report to you, that experience and that skill set is gold, and you can take that anywhere. But how it changes and how it evolves as you start to, move into maybe a more operational role, like a COO role, or even oftentimes they lump in like product and growth, or product and marketing, or product and sales, or product and something. It allows you to, your point around empathy and trying to understand the audience that you're speaking with. So communication is paramount. Context switching, as you move into the COO, CEO role, none of my days, none of my meetings, none of my hours are the same. So yeah, I'm going from a sales meeting to a marketing meeting to a board meeting to meeting with legal to meeting with finance, every hour on the hour. I also work remotely, so it's literally every hour on the hour. So you have to start to, you got to know your business, but know it broadly. Versus when you're in a, maybe a product team, it very deep. As you start to transition into more operational roles, you start to know more broadly about the organization. And so, you may be, while it's important to always stay, I think, rooted into your product, so don't ever get too far away from that experience, whether it's a SaaS product or consumer facing product, that you're not using it. So, but that you're really kind of dipping your toe broadly into every department within the organization. So, I hope that answered the question. I kind of lost, I kind of lost the question in there somewhere, but yeah.
No, thank you.
Yeah, stakeholders, I come back to knowing your audience a bit as that sort of underlying element, right? As the CEO, you've got investors, board, you've got your leadership team, you've got the entire organization behind that, you've got your customers. Each of those are different stakeholders, and they all have a slightly different interest, right, in what it is that's happening and what you have to say and how you're framing it. To me, a lot of it is listening. I'm big on, truly listening. Sometimes someone hears something, you say something, you hear it, but you haven't really listened to what they're saying. So, taking enough time to listen in terms of each of your stakeholder groups, because they're all different. And they're all, you may think they're saying the same things at times, but they're not, right? And especially when I just came, 3-hour drive after a 2024 strategy meeting over the last couple of days, and it's so evident, right? You've got your operational team, you've got your COO, you've got your product team that's trying to get some things across. You've got I'll say constructive friction happening in the room, right? They're all different stakeholders. Are we all pulling in the same direction? Yes, but we're all trying to make the company better, and they're all stakeholders, and they're slightly different in terms of their vantage point, right? And a lot of it's just making sure you're taking time to listen and understand that vantage point as a stakeholder.
Thank you both. So taking a little bit of a detour in the questioning, so just thinking about, for those that are maybe a little bit earlier in their careers or contemplating their next move, specifically whether it's moving up in product management or maybe more into executive roles, what advice would you give for those that are aspiring to move into executive roles in the future? What are some of the key skills and criteria that they should be focused on building?
I'll throw the hat in the ring first here. Be able to succinctly get a message across. A lot of times in product management, you are so down in the weeds and in the details, right? When you, especially as a technical product manager, right, where you're trying to convey all the nuances and the latitudes and the things that are related to a certain feature that you're trying to get across. Even on the business side, if you're a little bit more on the business side, right, you're again, and this is all good stuff, right? You need to do that. You need to understand those things. But on the business side, right, equally so, you might have things related to legal inferences or things that you're trying to work the pricing team on, or what have you. When you're making that shift now, where you're talking to an executive, or when you're talking to somebody else in leadership, understand that for sure they're not going to know the depth of the subject that you know it. You don't need to let them know that you know the depth of the subject. Try and bring, a summary. Try and bring the succinct points that it is that you're either engaging them on, giving them an update on. What are the things? Think about what is relevant to the person, the individual on the other side, and approach it that way, because you're going to run out of time. I guarantee you. Because to your point, you're shifting. You've got a finite amount of time. You're trying to get an update appropriately. You're also trying to impress, that executive or that CEO with, what the work that you've been doing and so on. But just understand what they're really looking for. Be succinct, and be open. Right? Don't feel like in being succinct you're hiding something. You're just trying to convey the right points for what that person needs in terms of that process.
So those are great. And I think, when it comes to that idea of active listening and taking it in, I'd say one of the things is understand how your business creates value. How does it create value for your customers? How does it make revenue? I'll never forget, I was in a product meeting with an engineering team, and there was QA, and we were working on a project, and one of the engineers put up their hand and said, I'm not really sure how we make money here. And I was like, okay, you know what, we're gonna stop this meeting and I'm gonna explain how the company makes money. Because I think it's really important for everyone to understand, how do we bring value to our board members, to our shareholders, to our founder, whatever the structure is of the organization that you're working in. But if you are a product person in the organization and you're not quite sure how that company operates, or how it makes revenue, or how it gives value back to its founder or owners or shareholders, find out. Like, you know, somebody in the sales department or maybe the operations department, sit down and ask them a little bit about how the organization works, maybe some of the history, how you've gotten to where you are, right? Because when you understand how that company builds value, you can really start to ideate and innovate around that. And someone is always, a founder or an executive is always going to want to have somebody on their team that has ideas around how do we continue to improve and create value in our organization. So I think that's a really, you know, a great place to start, is to just really understand how the business works. And it's okay if you're sitting here right now and saying, I actually don't know how all of the departments in the company work. That's okay, because some of us work in really large companies, right? But this is a great opportunity for you to find out. You also might find out that you actually are maybe interested in moving to a different department or moving into a different area, or moving into a different industry, right? But knowledge is power. I always say to my team, every day is a school day, right? So learning something new about your industry or about your business every day. And executives always want people who can solve problems.
Mhm.
It's not just about identifying problems. We can all identify problems, right? We want people who can solve problems or help us find a path to solve problems or be a part of that solution. So I think if you understand how the company builds value, again, both for customers and for their owners, shareholders, and then you also understand some of the things that are holding back the organization into improving or growing, and then you're building and you're galvanizing ideas around the improvements, woo, sky's the limit.
Wonderful, thank you both. I'm just going to piggyback off something that you said in terms of just that focus on the value, and really understanding the value. One of the things that I would say that I would add to that is that orientation towards outcomes versus outputs. And oftentimes what we focus on when we're earlier in our careers is how much are we doing? And that is a measure of our success. We're going to our leadership to try to demonstrate how much we can do. Whereas once you get to those senior levels, it's really more about how can I do less to get the outcome that I want? And so having that sort of orientation and shift, I think oftentimes ends up being paramount to being able to make that leap into more leadership roles.
Yeah, I totally agree. We even with our engineering and product teams, we take a view of, let's all look at the data together. We actually do a very transparent all hands every 2 weeks where we show all of the information. And you know, when I had turned away quite early around counting points or counting the amount of work or that is done in a sprint, for example, because you could do 27 points in a sprint, but 27 points is something that's not going to make any value to either the end user or the company. So, you know, and I always think of that, and your time, engineering time, design time, salespeople's time, that's the investment, right? That's the money that the company is putting in. So whatever you're working towards, it should be valuable, right? And so, yeah, I think, you know, anything that you can do. So once you understand, again, how your company makes value, you're measuring that and you're sharing that information out all the time. And you're using that as your benchmark or litmus test around the value that you're bringing and how you're structuring projects and work to be done. Again, that changes the whole game within your organization. Hopefully you're already doing that.
Yeah, just add to both of those points to make it, really, the value equation up front is critical. If you don't understand the value, you have to intimately understand that value, be able to articulate the value, be able to document the value, be able to, before engineering, software, whoever lifts a finger, right? Everyone has to understand that value. So we've been focused on that now for over a year, and making sure, just even from a tooling perspective, that things get captured appropriately in that context. So it's extremely important. Those are awesome points.
Well, thank you both. So we're gonna switch over to some of the questions from the audience. There's a few really good ones coming in, so I'm gonna pick a couple of here. So starting off with, what was the biggest adjustment for you personally in the first few months of being a CEO for the first time?
I would say, my transition started coming before the title change. And I think that's actually quite common for a lot of roles that people move into, right? I often say, usually it's really easy to give a promotion to somebody who's already doing 80% of the job. Because you have a lot of confidence that they'll be able to continue to grow. So I was actually offered the CEO role earlier than before I took it. And I think, for me, it was just, we had an open conversation with the original CEO and founder. And around once the acquisition happened, she wanted to take a little bit of time to step back. And then we kind of gradually transitioned. And then, kind of picked a date, announced to the staff, and kind of moved towards that. So I kind of really felt like it was gradual. I'm sure in some cases it's an abrupt leaving, but for me it was actually really kind of natural. And so it was, slowly picking up more and more responsibilities, really taking the lead on, again, planning, some of the larger decisions being made in the company. And then her actually also, kind of pivoting everyone towards me as the primary decision maker also made that transition really easy.
Just in terms of a couple of the different scenarios, the one really didn't have a lot of time to think. In one role, really got into the role and the position, and there was such a tight timeline around some things that had to be done that really didn't think about anything like that. It was just jump into it and get going, get the departments going, get the structure going, getting the whole set of processes going around the said thing that had to be done. In the second instance, different company, completely very, very different. There was a founder transition, and in that case, it was more so how to have some empathy with the founder, right? That is sort of handing that off and going through those stages, those handoff points of different things. Some things, he clearly didn't mind at all. Others, there was, needed a little bit more empathy all the way through the process, right? So that would have been probably the biggest challenge in one of the roles. Yeah.
I'll just quickly speak to my own experience. I think, and I hate to admit it, but it is true. One of my biggest difficulties in the transition was actually letting go of the product that I had built. Being able to step away and give it to somebody else to lead and sort of, really giving them the free rein to do so, I think was difficult, especially because the product that I had built, I had sort of done from the MVP to its the state that it was in. And so that difficulty of sort of letting go was something that it took a little bit of time to get it out of my hands.
That's great. That's ownership, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm not sure if my VP loved that at the time, but we made it work eventually. So taking another question here that seems to have a lot of popularity. When talking to your PMs or PM product management teams, what do you want to know and what don't you want to know? What can I skip telling you?
Yeah.
I mean, I think, I don't originally come from a software development background. My background started in marketing and business management. So, but over 25 years in product and in tech, I've learned a few things along the way. But I don't necessarily need to know exactly how everything is being built. So I would say there's some, kind of high, we don't need to go as deep. We can go broader in terms of solutions. Where I think I always say, where do you need my support? We have, regular check-ins so that, especially in a remote working environment, there's probably a number of you that are either hybrid or remote. I am consciously aware of, I don't want people to feel isolated. I don't want people to feel like they don't have support. So I'm there, but I do it in a way that I'm not checking in. I don't necessarily want to just hear a progress update. More so if things are off the rails or if you need support at a juncture, then I'm here for you. But just going around a table and telling me that you did exactly what you said you were gonna do, awesome, we can kind of skip over that. Yeah.
Big believer in, so I'm a double E, and at times I go too deep with some of the teams, but that's only because I like it sometimes. But I really expect anybody that's coming, if they aren't exactly sure, ask me. If they don't really know what kind of update I want, ask me. Just like it's a pretty simple thing, right? In terms of I may want to go deeper, and I'll articulate that, but I may only want a delta update to the last time it happened, or specifically, as you said, listen, I only want to hear if there's anything in the yellow or red. If it's green, great, keep doing what you're doing, right? I don't need an update that way because your time is valuable, my time is valuable. If it's green, it's good, right? So to me, it really depends on the situation. If there is something that's schedule is being impacted, if there are things that aren't going well, expect a longer period of time, expect more understanding, and not more understanding because I'm going to grill somebody, but how can I, like, let's figure this out. Like, why are we having these issues? How do we get them resolved? What are obstacles that I can help with? Are there other organizations that can help with it? So it really depends. But the biggest thing is make sure you just know what that person on the other side is expecting from you. Because it could be different, right? Depending on the situation.
Something that I've always said is, bad news or difficult conversations never get better with age. So the longer you wait, it's not going to get better. So if you get ahead of it, then, oftentimes your leader has probably lived through a similar situation, or maybe had a similar difficulty or even failure that's very similar, that, their experience and expertise, lean on that. That's what they're there for. So I would say, kind of getting ahead of any kind of negative news is always good, because again, it's not going to get better with age.
Thank you both. So taking another question from the audience, what's a strongly held belief that you had as a PM that changed once you reached the C-suite?
Changed.
I'd say when I was first a PM, and it actually changed before I got up to the C-suite, but kind of that accountability and ownership, which I think is so important, but it's not everything, right? So if things don't go exactly the way that you planned, or if you have to adjust scope or timing or budget or whatever it may be, that's okay. Like, I kind of started to realize that, and it actually started more so when I did my MBA later on, kind of in the middle of my career, as opposed to right after I finished my undergraduate. And I was somebody who, like, I was doing presentations at 2 a.m. and kind of working all night. And when I started doing my MBA, I did it while I was working. So I just didn't have, like, there's literally not enough hours in the day. And actually I got so much better because I got to step back from the project. I think sometimes when you have this like all-encompassing ownership or desire for your product to do well, sometimes you can't see the forest for the trees. And so I think one of the things I learned going through that experience was sometimes you just have to take a step back, and that different perspective or a good night's sleep, oh my gosh, it gives you such a good perspective, and actually just makes you better to work with.
Nuanced, but down the same track. There's this element of accountability and responsibility. A lot of times that comes with that ownership around a product, especially again if you have the business ownership as well. But one of the things for sure on that changed is there's more than just you involved in the success of the product, right? Sometimes you take that a little too far, right? I've seen that, and I used to do that. where stakeholders around you, people that don't report to you, and you're driving and you're driving to get the right outcomes that you know the business needs and so on and so forth. But it's not just you. Like there's other people that have to be held accountable and responsible for their parts of those things. And that to me was one of the biggest sort of aha, right? As you sort of evolve into a more senior role is, yeah, success comes when the whole team is doing the things that they need to do, not one individual. So.
Yeah, it usually takes an army, right, of people to get a really great product out the door. And I think, you know, one of the things that I learned earlier on was just around that active listening piece. And I wanted to get really good at it. So I set myself a challenge to say, if I was in meetings, to never be the first one to talk, unless it was to say hello, but always let somebody else lead the conversation. And then say what I heard you, if I could just repeat what I think I heard you say. So just because I'm taking notes, I just want to make sure. So I started doing those things to just get really good at listening. And then when you start practicing just that habit, but then you actually become a really good listener and you don't have to do it. Like you don't have to set yourself a task. But I actually think that that's also one of the great skills about moving up into an executive role is that, you know, really good leaders listen to the people that work with them and work for them. And, you know, if you are in a room and you can actually listen and hear and acknowledge what people are saying, you know, a lot of times people really just want their voices heard. And a lot of people actually don't want the final vote. So that's actually, you know, that is something I also learned during product management. Lots of voices. Not everybody has the vote. Or necessarily wants it. So, but yeah.
Great, thank you both. So I'll take one more here for now. Did you always identify yourself as a generalist required to be a CEO? Or did you identify as a product person that had to learn how to be a generalist?
Yeah. Again, didn't really think about it until the question got asked, quite frankly. But I think if I look back, I was always a generalist product manager, if I can say it that way. Like and that may not sound entirely correct, but I always sort of had this element of, okay, I need to understand that more, I need to understand that more, even though it wasn't my direct responsibility. I felt like I would be better at my role by making sure I understood those other things, whether it be reviewing legal contracts, filling out RFPs, working with sales, doing like whatever it was. So I kind of enjoyed having that broad element, even though, you know, across all those elements, there was one that was very deep, which was product management. So I don't know if I answered the question, but that was sort of just how I operated, I'll say.
I mean, I think a lot of the skills that you have can be applied generally across a number of industries. And that's again what I love about product management. And I think that's what's great about what all of you are working in. And I think it's what I was able to bring to the table in a number of companies that I worked with. And I think, you know, I will always be, you know, kind of a tech product manager at heart, and I bring that skill set and that experience to the table. One of the things that I speak to the founder of EXP, Glenn Sanford, about all the time, who started out his career in real estate. As you can imagine, as the world's largest independent brokerage, most of the people who work at EXP have at one point or are still real estate agents. I am not a practicing real estate agent, but I have also built many, many tech products, released many. I have built a company big enough to be acquired. Like all of those things that they don't have is what I can bring to the table. And so, I think, yes, the skills that like stakeholder management, budgeting, vision, influence, motivation, all of those things that you do in and out every day, I think are general in the sense that they can be applied across any industry, any size of company, any growth stage. So in fact, I'd say many of you are probably already generalists to begin with.
Yeah, and I just to piggyback on a couple of points there. I've been in 6 fundamentally different industries. And you are taking what you learned from one and you're bringing it to the other. And that's part of your product training inherently. Like you're a sponge. There are tangential problems. They're not going to be the exact same problems, but your problem solving capabilities, whatever those things are, you're bringing from whatever market vertical or different technology base that you're in. So this is great training ground for whatever it is that you want to do eventually, right? Keep that in mind, and it's all applicable. It is all applicable, really.
Okay, thank you. I'm actually making a choice to take another one here that I just saw come up a little bit higher. So as a product leader reporting to the CEO, what can you do to ensure true partnership, trust, and alignment with the CEO? So touching a little bit more on what are the things that you're looking for those really great product leader CEO dynamics?
Well, and you know, you mentioned earlier just stepping away from the product and being so deep in it. You know, for some it's a difficult transition at first, but I fully believe and for a number of years, like I don't build a product for me. Right. I'm not even though I may identify as very similar from the customer, you know, if I only ran a business for one person, my business wouldn't grow very fast or go very far. Right. So I want to build this for millions of people. So I need lots of opinions. I need, you know, lots of research. I need to appreciate the diversity of opinion that I have in the room. And so I would say, you know, as an executive working with a product manager, what I like to lean on and lean into is I let them tell me, you know, I really think that we should do this or build this or launch this or prioritize it in this order. And I'm like, okay, let's talk through that. Why do you think that? Let's so come to the table with, you know, the confidence to have that conversation, but also, you know, I'm also not just, you know, just going to deliver everything on your opinion because then we'd be building the business around your one person. So what is it that you're bringing to the table? Is it previous historical experience? Is it user research? Is it, you know, market conditions, industry information? You know, what is helping support that data-driven kind of decision? And then we should all galvanize that around that, right? Because it is, again, this isn't a business built for one person. If we want to grow, we want to make sure our business works for as large as the consumer base as we possibly can. So I think, you know, being prepared, but as an executive, I certainly want to have strong people working with me that I trust their opinions.
Depends on the conversation. And what I mean by that is, if they're coming to me as the CEO and we're having a discussion as product person to CEO, then, you know, the points you bring up, all absolutely 100% agree. At times though, they want my help from having been in product management a lot of years. If they're having a struggle or an issue with either a stakeholder and so on. So it depends, right? It really depends in terms of that, because I've done it for so many years and a lot of scars, a lot of failures, a lot of good things too. But you know, I've seen a lot of things. It depends on which conversation we're having and which hat am I wearing at that particular moment, right? Am I being an advisor to the product guy, or am I being the CEO of the company? If it's the CEO of the company, you nailed it in terms of, you know, what you expect out of them, right? If it's a product issue or they're having a challenge with engineering that they can't seem to find the right resolution to, or with sales or whatever it is, from a product perspective, then, you know, I'll coach and advise from that perspective. So it kind of depends given the background. Yeah.
I'll never forget, I was working on a project where the launch went really well. And then a couple of months later, it didn't go so well. and just the amount of effort the team was putting in to kind of right the ship. And I'll never forget, my CTO at the time was like, you feel like you're in this dark hole right now that you can't get out of. And he's like, but I've been in that hole. And I've been where you are, and I'm telling you, you will get out and you will be on the other side. And you will do the work and the ladder will come down and you will climb out and you will remember that. And I still remember that, and I still remember that experience. So from your perspective, exactly, right? Like if you have a CEO that has a product management background, they've been in the hole at some point.
Multiple times.
Multiple times. So if you feel like you are in the hole, again, that news doesn't get better with age. Go to them as advisor, as expert, as somebody, as a friend, as a confidant, and rumble around that, because yeah, I've been in the hole. And I got out, and I'm telling you, it's sunny on the other side.
The other thing, which is really great if you decide to take this path or want to take this path, is you're going to have success and failures in other areas of the business. It's not just product management.
Yeah.
You will have had failures and you're in the hole.
You get to fail all
You
over
get
the
to
place.
fail all over the place, right? So you get to, and equally so, you get experience in a lot of those things. So you could, whether it's advising the product team, things that you've seen with sales that have worked or have not worked in the past, because you're a key salesperson as well when you're CEO, right? I would argue that you're a key salesperson as well when you're in product, right? You've got to be that person. So yeah, it's sort of never ending, right? Your shoulders are pretty broad. You're constantly expanding, and regardless of whether you're going this direction into that C-level suite, but even just from a product management perspective, you got broad shoulders. Just keep growing those, right? You got amazing capacity. You just got to grow it.
And I was actually just wanted to add one thing that Carrie said, just around the concept of that sort of advisory almost relationship between a product leader and a CEO. And I think from one perspective, we look at it as, regardless of reporting lines, this is somebody that essentially is your trusted advisor. This is the person that you go to with these challenges. It's somebody that helps you brainstorm. It's somebody, but it works both ways. And I think oftentimes we're looking for those that are sort of our senior leaders to help guide us. But in that relationship, at least from my experience, it's my head of product was my right hand. But at the same time, we were able to bounce ideas off of each other, even if it wasn't related to product, because he had that sort of holistic understanding of the business, the value we were providing, and some of the challenges we faced.
Just on that point, like there's no have a view of a mentor or someone, even if it's not your CEO, it could be the COO, or it could be make sure you have somebody that that you actually look up to and you want to learn some things from, and have that relationship, establish that relationship is what I would advise you to do. I've had a lot of great opportunities and people that I've learned from, and equally learn things not to do, but also do the right things. And to that point, I won't name the company, previous company I was with, but absolutely great relationship with a number of the C-levels when I wasn't a C-level, and I had other reporting structures, other people that I reported into that would otherwise report into the C-level suite. But the relationship was so good in terms of advisory and just that piece that you were describing, lots of instances where I'm having more discussions with the CEO than my boss was, and that can be uncomfortable if you have someone that's worried about that. But in other ways, and I had some really great people that I looked up to and reported into, that's a testament to sort of what you've learned about the business, right? Well, how deep is your understanding around that? How much time have you spent with customers, right? Make sure you're spending time with customers. That's a great way to understand your business. Anyway, I just wanted to double down on that point.
Yeah, no, absolutely. No, thank you. So just in that sort of vein, thinking about ways to create this dynamic, what are some suggestions that you would give product managers in terms of how to improve their relationship with just executives as a whole?
I mean, there was a lot of times where maybe I was working late in the office and they were also working late. So I'd take a stop by their office, or, I'd see them, kind of maybe in the coffee and kind of coffee room and ask them some questions. A couple of times I was bold enough when I was more of a kind of maybe just a senior manager that I asked my CEO out for lunch, just to learn about the company. And he got very familiar with who I was. The company wasn't that large. The Weather Network, so that was Pierre Morissette, who is still the founder of the Weather Network and still running the Weather Network as the executive chairman. But I remember popping around to his office and he was like, "Are we going to lunch?" Because I just booked it with his secretary and his office manager, and I was like, "Yeah, we are." But yeah, it just kind of as an executive now, I will always take time for somebody who wants to learn more about the business. Somebody who is, either I have a co-op that's working in a company right now who actually wants to work in professional sports. So he doesn't necessarily want to work in real estate, but he's like, "Hey, I know your background. I know you work for the Toronto Blue Jays. Hey, can I spend an hour, kind of talking with you?" And I'm like, "For sure." So, being able to, approach somebody within your organization, whether it's your CEO. For many years, my mentor was our CFO. I also learned a lot about, kind of business management, financial management at a broader scope by working with her. So there's a lot of folks in the organization that will give you the time if you're really just interested to learn more.
Yeah, I'll echo the same sentiment, right? There's all the good CEOs will always make time for their people. And regardless of whether you're a product person or any other aspect of the business, they will make time for you. And just don't be so forward in terms of what it is that you're expecting. That's not like, show them that you're interested in the business. Show them that you're interested in understanding the business more. Show them that you want to learn, or that you tell them what your goals are in those moments, but don't look at it as an opportunity to demonstrate something to them. Like that's not what they're looking for in individuals, right? Do the right things for the business. Show them that you're doing the right things for the business that you want to learn, and good things will happen, right? Don't focus so much on, "Oh, I really got to get to that next level before I'm this age," or that. Don't focus on those things. Really don't. Those are not going to help, right? Do the right things for the business. The right things will happen. Really.
Think about just doing a quick time check. Do we have time for one more question?
Yeah, 5 minutes.
Perfect. So asking one more from the audience, what specific skills or experience from your PM roles have proved most valuable in the CEO position?
Most valuable. I'll say the grounding that I got in engineering helped me immensely in product management, and that just carried through. And what I mean by that is it's the problem solving, because now you're helping to solve problems on the nth degree, right? As the CEO, hopefully you have a lot of people that are solving those problems, but in the end, right? The problem solving to me, and being able to do that aspect, and not necessarily solving the direct problem, but whether it's resources or finding ways to help other people solve those problems. That's kind of a big thing for me. You can't teach that necessarily, right? It's something that you learn with experience, with the different things that you're involved in, the experiences you've gone through, the holes you've dug out of. That's empirical knowledge that at times, but the problem solving to me is a big one.
I would say, kind of influence, communication, motivating people. We come back to motivating people in galvanizing around a goal, especially when those people don't report to you. I cannot stress enough what a great skill that is to develop, because sure, when you become an executive, and especially the CEO role, now everybody reports to you. But if you are running a company and you are trying to get everyone to galvanize around a mission and a vision for your organization, gosh, what a great training ground to be able to do that. if you're coming up through product management and you have already done that over and over and over again, for maybe a certain product or feature or new launch or whatever it is that you're, trying to hit budget, trying to hit on time, trying to hit, scope features. So, that whole, kind of organizing around a common goal and a common thread, and how do you message people around that value of what you do? I think that's a skill I use every day.
Yeah, those are absolutely key. I think one thing that I would add to that again sort of stands out in my mind is just taking that perspective of sort of the approach of thinking about the future and sort of visioning. And that was something that I really took away from my time as a PM that really transferred into my role as a CEO. When I was a PM, we used to have our weekly stand-ups, and it would always start with, imagine this. It was just a white slide. It just said, imagine this. And then we would talk about sort of, what is it going to look like for our customer 6 months from now? We didn't have anything actually outside of the concepts in our minds, but just sort of this message and this direction setting. And so being able to really guide the vision was something from a product perspective that I really transferred over into my role as a CEO. So before we wrap our conversation for today, any final thoughts or any final takeaways that you'd like to share with our audience today?
Everybody's journey is going to be different. There is no textbook on this. There is no straight line. Each one of your journeys are going to be different. And, think about what is going to be, what success means to you. And it doesn't necessarily have to mean getting to the C-level suite, right? So be good with sort of what it is that you're happy with, what direction you want to take. If this is the direction you want to take, it's going to be lots of hard work. There's going to be lots of pitfalls, but it's worth it. For sure, it's worth it. But it's not for everybody, right? It's not for everybody, and there's nothing wrong with that, right? There's lots of great people, lots of good work. There are careers all throughout your product. If you're staying in product management, there's lots of breadth that you can experience at different stages of your career. So just know that you're in a terrific role. Really, you've done a lot to even be in that product management role, because it doesn't get entrusted to anybody. It just doesn't, right? It's not like you graduate with a product management degree. There's a reason why you're in that role, and so just build on that, and take the small successes along the way.
I just to maybe kind of echo some of the same themes, but don't necessarily pigeonhole yourself, right? Like if somebody asked me when I graduated from university, in my early 20s, whether, fast forward, I was going to be the CEO of a real estate tech company, I'd be like, what? Like I couldn't have even imagined it, right? And I think even with, we were talking earlier just about some of the AI advances, and like we can't even imagine what is coming next year, the year after, in 5 years, 10 years. So don't kind of put yourself in a box. Just be open. And thinking about, what are, like I said before, many times you are generalists in what you do. So maybe write down some of the things that you want to, become, or where you want to work, but that's not necessarily, within an industry or within a certain company size. Maybe it's something more, like I said, I really only want to work primarily with Canadian entrepreneurs. I love Canada. I love the growth. I wanted to be part of that innovation. I love working in Toronto. So those were some of the things that I wanted. Incidentally, the founder of VXP is actually from Grande Prairie, Alberta, so I ticked that box again. but some of those things, that I wanted to do my MBA. I wanted to write down some of these goals, but don't necessarily maybe pigeonhole yourself into one area. Because there are opportunities, there are companies right now that are being generated that we can't even imagine are coming down the pipe, that are going to be such amazing opportunities for all of you.
Thank you so much, both. And I think both of you have actually touched on very important points, and just echoing a little bit of that. certainly making sure that we're giving ourselves the opportunity to be open and thinking about paths in the career. One thing I would add to that is asking yourself, what do you want to do regardless of what the title is? And I think that's a really big important piece of it, which is if you ask yourself, if titles didn't exist, what do you want to be doing with your 40 or likely 40 plus hours a week? What is it that you want to be doing every single day? Is it building? Is it guiding? Is it leading? What do you want to really lean into? And I think I say this because I very much like you can resonate with that statement. What I thought I was going to be at 25 versus 30 versus 35 plus the times after that is very, very different. And so really giving ourselves the opportunity to be open and build as many skills that you can transfer to other industries, other roles. Everybody here has a lot of career ahead of them. So just keep that in mind in terms of thinking a path forward. Thank you so much both for
Thank
the
you.
engagement,
Oh,
the
thank you
rich
so much for having us.
conversation,
It's great.
answering all the questions, mine and the audience's. Really appreciate you both being here, and thank you to our hosts.
Thanks very much, everybody.
Sorry.
Just a few quick last comments. So again, one big massive round of applause for our analysts. Yeah, exactly. So we're coming to the end of the year, and you know that means that there's going to be a holiday party, and so we have one in a mere couple of weeks. The TPMA Holiday Social. There'll be discussions, there'll be raffles, there'll be booze and food aplenty. So please join us. It's going to be a lot more free flowing. There's no formal speaking part of it, but so we invite you to come to Delaware one last time. So save the date, Tuesday, December 12th. Lastly, it wouldn't be a product management event unless we ask for your feedback. But we're also planning next year. So we're planning the events for next year. We've got a lot of different concepts, but we really want to hear your voice. So please, there's a question in the feedback form of this event, but then also let us know what you want to hear about, the subjects, the speakers, the problems that you're facing. We want to reflect that back in our events program. So please, yeah, so those are the two things to remember: holiday social, feedback. And other than that, yeah, thanks so much. And yeah, stick around, talk to your fellow product managers, and thanks very much, everyone.
Taking lots of pictures.
Yeah.
Oh,
For sure. Sure.
there.